And we are broadcasting.
Great, thank you. Welcome everybody to the Monday, December 14th meeting of EBCE's Community Advisory Committee meeting. Can we have roll call, please?
Sure. Member Eldred?
Present.
Pacheco?
Present.
Padilla?
Here.
Landry?
I see Cynthia.
Landry is on.
But yeah.
Okay. Vice Chair Frank?
Here.
Chair Sutter?
Present.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Great, thank you. So our next item are public comments, and I think I heard that we do have at least 2 speakers. Can you please ask
For public comment, I have Paul Kangas and Alita Dupree. If you're dialing in, it is #9 to raise your hand. If your name has been called and you have signed up for public comment, please raise your hand and I'll unmute your microphone as soon as I'm able to identify you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair Mary Sutter and members. Alita Dupree for the record. My pronouns are she and her. I'm trying out some new wireless headphones, so I appreciate the sound check. You know, we're almost at the end of the year, but I think that we're on the edge of taking this agency to the next level, and the numbers show it. In my last reading, this agency, that is EBCE, uses about twice the amount of electricity, sells it to the public, as the Metropolitan Transportation Authority in New York. Most of that MTA power is for traction. It runs railroads and subways. So what we're doing is really big and serves a lot of people. And I want to see our focus on being able to displace fossil fuel energy with renewables and to develop renewables and other electrified technologies locally. It helps the people in the community, puts money in the community, and puts local people in the community to work. So what we're doing is we're investing in our community that is EBCE territory. And our work is much bigger than selling kilowatt hours. When I read about curtailment of kilowatt hours in various regions of the state, where we're overproducing solar and much of it can't be moved because of transmission constraints, I certainly think our agency is much more than being a retailer, but should certainly be a voice in connecting to the rest of the state and the country with transmission and generation. So storage is an essential part of that. We can build enough storage to ride through those afternoon peaks and eliminate some of that duck curve. It's going to put money in our community instead of sending it out and away. And this is not being isolationist. It's about being connected, because then as we develop a position of strength, our movement can help others to be more resilient in these challenging times. So as you go about your work today and beyond, let's remember that EBCE is something much bigger than ourselves for a cleaner and greener and more affordable California. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. Who's our next person?
Second call for Paul K. I'm not seeing them on the attendees list.
Okay. Well, hopefully the person will join in at a later date and we may be able to fit it in for one of the other ones. But let's move on to our next item, C3, which is the approval of the minutes from November 16th. For folks on the phone, do I have a motion?
I so move to accept.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Anything that needs to be updated? It looks like Cynthia dropped off again. Am I just not seeing everybody?
I don't see her there.
I
either.
don't see her.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you can keep an eye out for her and she can come in. There is one phone call listener. I don't know if that's Cynthia's phone number though.
See, I've allowed the call-in number to speak. So if it is Cynthia, if you can please unmute yourself.
Hi, who at 510-333? Is that you,
Yes.
Cynthia? Nope. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and have a roll call vote then, and hopefully Cynthia can join back in.
Sure. And this will include the makers of the motion. Eldred,
Yes.
Pacheco,
Aye.
Padilla,
Yep.
Frank,
Yes.
Sutter.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes with attendance.
And this 333 did raise their hand. I don't know, they're back. They raised their hand.
You press #9. You can unmute yourself. Hello. Cynthia.
Nope. Okay. Well, we'll continue to keep an eye out, or look to see if she joins and go forward. But we have a packed agenda today, so I want to keep us moving. So hopefully we'll get out of here within our 2-hour time period. The next item is the chair report. I have 3 things that I want to provide to the CAC and the public. The first one is a bit back. Cynthia asked me about public records and how these things are put on the EBCE website. And so I had actually talked with Stephanie about this in the past and failed to bring it out in our November meeting. But I do want to let people know that memos, public comments will be eventually on the EBCE website. Right now, there's some bugs that are happening in getting these things on. But one of the items also is the CAC annotated notes that go to the board. So eventually these things will be there. And I just wanted people to know that at some point, these will be making it up to the public website. The second one is an item that's on the EBCE board that we did not have time to present and talk about today, but I wanted people to be aware of and go look at, either attend the Wednesday meeting or look on the PowerPoint and the information that's on the Wednesday meeting for the board, which is the COVID relief grants. EBCE has granted another $250,000, $250,000 to 8 different recipients. And that is going out. So good to hear. But like I said, we didn't have time to talk about it here. Please go look online to find out more information. The last thing is about CAC applications. Nick on Wednesday will be presenting to the board that the application period is going to open as of the 16th. It's going to run for 2 months. The website is now available for people to go look at, and the applications are live. So if people want to go fill it out before the 16th, I think Stephanie said, they'll be included. I don't think this 2 days are going to matter a whole lot, but it really is going to rely on the board members in their areas, given how the new CAC is going to be really representative of geographic areas. So really, we're hoping for the board members to reach out to people, as well as the people on the phone and the public that are in different areas. So that's going. Very excited to see that. So at some point, hopefully sometime after February, we're going to have a larger CAC group than what we have now. So that's it for my chair report. And I think with that, we'll move on to item C5, which is further discussion about the metrics initiative that we introduced last month. JP is going to talk about the customer relation management tool, the CRM, and how some of that information may be used in the future. JP?
Yep. Hi, Chair Sutter. Thanks very much. Stephanie, I think we have some slides for this. So great. We can pull those up and start walking through them. Great. Next slide, please. So just a bit of a reminder, what we're talking about today is our Salesforce customer relationship management tool that we will be rolling out over the course of really the next year. It'll take kind of a while to get it fully bedded down, but we're making some exciting progress, and we'll have some activities going on really currently through the end of this year and in the first quarter of next. But just as a reminder, we have selected Salesforce. We're currently kind of finalizing the data model, basically the structure in which we are going to be holding our customer accounts and contacts, their names and addresses, as well as their electricity bills, and it's also a place where we can manage and report and track calls and emails to all of our customers, and really kind of work to build a good contact database. Right now, the contact records that we receive from PG&E through the 4013 data don't have a great mechanism and structure for maintaining customer emails and phone numbers, and so we're really working to make that work better for us, so that we can better interact with our customers. One example of that is like for our commercial accounts, the contact on the account is generally the person who pays the bill, so that's someone generally in accounts payable. But that's not really the energy manager or the person who's making decisions around things like solar or electric vehicles or energy efficiency or things like that. And so we want to make sure that as we build this system out, we build it in such a way that we are able to be in touch with the right people and the right decision makers, not only at the household level, but also with our businesses to reach out to people who are going to be receptive to the types of programs that we are launching and trying to get our customers enrolled into. And then in addition to Salesforce, we will have Aqueous, this program management tool and reporting application sitting on top of it, as well as Pardot, which will allow us to efficiently kind of track our marketing activities and outreach activities, so that we are really reaching customers where they are, how they want to be connected to, whether it's email or phone or websites, mobile phone and text. People want to be contacted in different ways. So making sure that we are recognizing that and kind of meeting our customers where they want to be met, as we are continuing to reach out to them for calls to action and other activities from a program's perspective. It's really important to do that in the way that customers want to be met. There are other CCAs that are using Aqueous. MCE's been using it for quite a while now to manage their energy efficiency programs and also to do metrics and reporting back to the Public Utilities Commission. So it's really well set up for not only knowing who our customers are, but also building out a more robust suite of program management and reporting tools and systems, so that as we start to get enrollments, as we start to see customers installing solar or saving money with energy efficiency or participating in demand response programs, we can actually start to track that at the account level. And part of that's going to be data that we collect directly from our customers. And part of it's also going to be data that is fed back to us from implementers. And so that's part of the work that me and my team are doing now, is to identify the metrics that we want to track and that we want our vendors to pass back to us and the format that we want them to pass that back to us, so that we can start to build out the capabilities within Salesforce to take that data back in and ingest it and then record it at a customer and an account level. So we are, as I said, currently kind of finalizing the data model and starting to move customer records and even testing how those records are looking in Salesforce now. And then the deployment really will continue through the next calendar year. Next slide, please. So here's an example of some of the functionality that Salesforce will provide. This is from the aqueous set of dashboards that they provided us, but in their proposal. So, you know, the kind of dashboard mentality is you want to have a way to visualize, you know, the rate at which your programs are being adopted, the types of customers that are enrolling in your programs. So things that we are thinking about now is, you know, making sure that we are tracking our DAC, our low income care enrollments in our programs, you know, how much, say, solar or other energy efficiency measure has been installed to date compared to what our goal is, either over the course of a month or the course of the program, as well as things like energy savings. So this is kind of a randomized dashboard, not anything specific to one of our programs, but gives a bit of a view of some of the ways that we'll be able to track how we are progressing with the programs that we are running. So imagine, you know, for our, say, our heat pump hot water heater program, we have a target of 250 hot water heaters. And, you know, we want to run that program for, say, 2 years. We should then have a target of what's the number of water heaters per month that we want to see being installed. And that can then, say, be the fuel gauge here. You know, are we doing this at the right speed, or do we need to increase or decrease our outreach in order to get the uptake that we want on a program? And, you know, you can imagine having a dashboard that says we want a specific number of customers from these communities or care customers enrolling in these programs. You know, are we meeting the right threshold and target that we've set ourselves? And having that kind of visualized in this format makes it, you know, quite a bit easier to share out, you know, internally as well as externally on how we are progressing compared to, say, a big spreadsheet, which can be difficult to digest. So these are the things that we are starting to work through now, is what are the things that we want to be reporting on and how do we want to be visualizing them. So got some meetings set up now with our team and the folks who are going to be delivering this for us, so we can walk through how these types of dashboards and reports have been structured for other CCAs and other program managers or teams that are implementing programs. So we can kind of pull that out and make sure that as we go into this, we understand what the tool has to offer. Next slide, please. So as we're going through this process and thinking through the different programs that we're running, we are now really starting to run a fairly robust set of programs that are enrolling our customers. You know, if you'll recall, some of our early programs around, say, reach codes or the fleet transportation electrification technical assistance program, those were more around enablement, specifically with our municipalities. And now we really have a set of programs that are, you know, either ongoing and just getting going, that are enrolling our customers in these programs. So we have our resilient home program, our critical facility solar and storage program, our heat pump hot water heater program, 3 different energy efficiency pay for performance programs, and our connected communities program that will be running our DAC GT and CSGT enrollments. And so we're kind of using these as a way to lay out what are the metrics and the measures that we want to be reporting on for these programs. So when we think about what are those metrics as they've been laid out by the local development business plan, and again, we need to be thinking about what are the things that we're tracking here in Salesforce. And if you'll recall, last week we talked about some of the other tools that we'll be using to measure benefits, like the in-plan model. So we want to separate those two things out and really think, okay, at a customer level, what are the things that we're going to be tracking at an account specific level? So things like, the amount of solar, kilowatts of solar that are sold and installed, the storage associated with that, kilowatts and kilowatt hours of storage, or numbers and the types of appliances. So we've got our heat pump hot water heaters. We also, through our low income energy efficiency program, are installing smart thermostats and doing weatherization on low income homes. So those are examples of the energy efficiency measures that we'll be tracking. We can also track expected kilowatt hour savings, which we are modeling through our energy efficiency programs, and then measured savings. So with Recurve, we are not only going to be modeling the savings, but we're creating a baseline and then tracking what are the actual realized savings compared to what the customer was using before we implemented those measures. And then of course we have to be tracking when did this happen? When did the energy efficiency measure, the solar, the battery, the electric vehicle, when did that get installed or enrolled, so that we can put a start date in place and measure the before and after. And then we also need to be thinking about what are the customer kind of attributes that we're going to be tracking, so that we know who and the types of customers that are participating in these programs. So there are particular customer attributes at an account level, like if the customer is a care or medical baseline customer. There's also geographic denominations that we can track, whether or not the account, the house, the business is in a DAC or low income census tract. We can track the type of housing unit, single family, multifamily, commercial, municipal. We also want to be tracking whether they are an owner or a renter, which is not something that we have data on in our system, but something that we want to know from the customers who are participating in our programs, as well as some kind of a customer satisfaction survey. Salesforce will also help us track that, how satisfied through what's known as a Net Promoter Score, and NPS is a very common and good way to measure satisfaction, so that we can understand how well our customers, how their experience was. And really that's also a measurement of how much customers are willing to talk about the benefits that they've gotten and tell their friends about it, which is a great way to get ongoing enrollments in the communities where we are successfully launching and enrolling these programs. So these are examples of things that we plan to track in Salesforce, and we're building this out and also looking at some of the good environmental justice and just transition reports that have been done. So the team is working through our diversity and equity and inclusion work, and the data and analytics team who's been working on this as well. So this is not everything that we'll be tracking, but I wanted to give you all kind of an update on where we are with Salesforce and metrics at this point in time. If we go to the next slide, we have a timeline on how we see this unfolding. So here's a rough timeline on how Salesforce is going to be released. So on the top big boxes are kind of the big chunks of how we are going to be releasing Salesforce kind of across the organization. So we're really finalizing the data model now and into the first quarter of next year. That should be done really kind of by the first month of next year. We're also loading our customer data And then through the middle of next year, really kind of building out a robust set of dashboards and reporting. And then we have the second set of arrows in the middle there is kind of Salesforce reporting. So we're drafting reports now. In the first quarter of 21, we'll be launching Aqueous and continuing to kind of finalize our reporting requirements. And then, as I mentioned before, we need to really make sure that we can gather data from our implementers to feed data back to us about program participation and results. So that'll be built kind of through Q1, Q2 of next year. And then, we'll be able to go out to our implementers and have them fill out those forms and send them back to us so that we can then ingest them back into Salesforce. So a rough timeline on how we see that Salesforce reporting and program tracking being built out amongst the larger framework across all of the metrics that we've been discussing now for the last couple of months. So just wanted to give that Salesforce update, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, JP. Just as a reminder, folks, the CAC, this is an informational item for us, so please ask your questions. The other thing is Stephanie, Cynthia is now on the line, and Cynthia, I can hear something going on in the background, so we can hear you, I believe. So I think if you have any questions, you should be able to unmute yourself. You look like you're unmuted now.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
yes. I wasn't able to unmute myself before, so I appreciate somebody, and I'll make sure I will mute myself again. Thank you, because I'm looking for something. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. So anybody, I know I have at least one question to ask JP, but I'll open it up first to the public. Do we have any public speakers on this item, Stephanie?
I have no public speakers for this item.
Great. Okay. Anybody on the committee have any
Sure.
questions?
I just have, I have one question.
Good.
Yeah, I see that MCE and Peninsula are using one of these systems. I'm just curious, what are there comparable systems being used by the 20 plus other CCAs? What are they using? Do you know?
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what every CCA is using. When we went out and did a request for systems, we kind of first identified the type of system we wanted, and that resulted in Salesforce being selected as kind of the preferred system. And then we went out with a solicitation. This was done under Taj to gather kind of system implementers who had applications or ways to configure Salesforce to meet our requirements around customer account management, marketing, and programs were kind of the three areas that we wanted to make sure we had covered. Ernie, I'm not totally clear on if there are other non-Salesforce based systems that are being used by the other CCAs. Sonoma would probably be the other one that would have been would have a comparable system, but my memory I don't believe they have a system. I'm not sure if they're just still using Calpines or not. We have our billing agents, like we use SMUD, and many of the other CCAs use Calpine, and they have their own CRMs. And SMUD, who does our account management backend, they use Salesforce, but the Salesforce organization that they have built is really pretty locked down, and we don't have any ability to kind of modify it to make it suit our needs. And so, I think I can kind of go into a lot of detail around CRMs. It's what I did in my last job, but I don't want to just go on and on. So if that didn't answer your question, that's good. I was just curious whether or not this particular, in general, there's no reason that you should know every CCA's data management tools. I was just wondering whether or not this generally gave us more options for tearing things apart and looking at them and quantifying them, if that's
what's
Yes, it absolutely does. And one of the reasons that we made this investment is because, you know, we want the flexibility to kind of manage our own customer information and data, and it allows us the flexibility to parse out other pieces, so we can break out, you know, billing to a billing service provider, and we have our own CRM, or we can break out other back office tools, because since now we own this back end customer management system, gives us a lot more flexibility going forward. And that was one of the purposes of doing this, even, you know, at the same time as renewing with SMUD for a couple more years. So once we build this out, it gives us a lot more organizational flexibility. And, you know, CRMs and things kind of fall into, you know, Oracle and SAP and the very, very large, very structured systems. And then this newer set of systems like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or other tools that are kind of a bit of a newer age, that have a lot more kind of flexibility and a bit of an a la carte menu for which parts of the applications you take on. So that flexibility element was certainly a rationale for us pursuing this when we did, and pursuing and signing up with Salesforce for that purpose.
Okay.
So
Thanks, JP. Yeah.
Cynthia, I see your hand up, but I don't know if that's for this item or your hand had just been up previously. So
My hand was up previously because of the muting. Thank you.
If you can go ahead and put it down, then that'll give me a sense of, I'll ask my question, JP. And I think that you touched on this, but I was trying to figure out who the phone number was at that point, so I might have missed it. How well might the Salesforce and some of this be able to track who your contractors are that are working on the projects? And I know this was that, I think it was I know that there's other components that you're thinking of tracking. Are they going to be able to be folded into this CRM in the future?
Yeah, so we we recently brought on a contract manager, CC, and so there's, I think, let's see, there's a couple ways to think about it. One is, like, we have our large scale procurement contracts, and there's lots of kind of big ticket items that are being managed there around, you know, place in service and all the LDs related to, you know, the contracts coming online in the right time. So that's the procurement contract world. And CC is kind of building out a tool and looking potentially using Salesforce or other bespoke contract management tools. When we think about programs and program contracts and those types, you know, and are we going to be integrating those contracts in? You know, the way I have, you know, I have a lot of experience in Salesforce from more of a sales perspective. Like, can we get the number of people enrolled, you know, and are we hitting our targets with respect to the timeline that we've set ourselves, or monthly or quarterly cadence? So when I think about how, you know, the first order of business is that kind of order of business, you know, how many do we want to install by when? And, you know, are our outreach activities and marketing activities delivering a funnel big enough to meet those requirements? So that's one piece. You know, the contract management piece is still a little bit up in the air. I've talked with CC about, you know, how do we think about these contracts and putting them into the system?
Can I clarify? I don't mean
yeah.
I don't mean the contracts.
Okay.
Per se. I'm thinking of the social equity or just transitions type of metrics that indicates that the contractors that are being used within the program, either, you know, often they're going to have subcontractors, or you're not going to have these people under contract. They are the typical trades folks that are
Yep.
doing the work. If there's going to be any potential or thought about trying to capture that to help understand how many people that live in a DAC neighborhood
Okay.
are actually getting some of the funds from EBCE programs to support their work. It's
Right.
more around that. And
Okay.
I'm not sure that I'm not sure that you're going to be able to do that, because I know that there was a document that you have to fill out for the state. And
That's right. So yeah, so we have General Order 156, GO 156, and that's our supplier equity and diversity survey.
Yeah.
And so that is, so we are working on that concurrently, and we've been working with Vanessa, who is on the procurement team, around structuring that and modifying some of the questions in that survey to track some of those questions. And so we're working through that, and that's another area that we've been utilizing some of the equity reports and work that have been done so far to try to extract that from our contractors. And then their subcontractors, and what are their, diversity policies, and, there's kind of the policy side of it. And then there's the, who are you hiring and where are you hiring from question, and how much of that hiring is happening because of the work that we are providing, and it starts to get a little hard to extract all of that. So that is something that we are doing. And I did talk to Vanessa, we are thinking, is that something that we would actually issue from within Salesforce or outside of Salesforce and then roll into it? I don't have a clear answer now on, is Salesforce kind of the right way to track it and tie it to the actual contracts that we are doing or the program areas that we were doing. That's pretty far down the line. Right now, we want to get the data, make sure we're asking the right questions, and get the data back in such a way that we can start to evaluate and see if it's the right way. This is the first year of GO 156, so people are going to see it and be like, what the heck is this? So I think longer term, the goal would be that, right now we don't have a contractual mechanism to require our vendors to fill out this survey and give us this information. We have some of our contracts, like our Resilient Home contract, that have workforce development requirements implicit, and that's good. But going forward, I think, responding to this survey and providing this information to us is something we should be thinking about adding as a standard provision to our contracts, so that we can make sure that we have a mechanism of getting that information back. So that'll be a ramp as we go and release that. But that's definitely the mechanism we are looking at to gather some of this hiring and workforce development data, because it's kind of the best tool and something that we're already doing in compliance with state law.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I knew you guys were doing it, but it hadn't been mentioned, and I wanted others on the call to be aware of it.
Yeah.
Jane,
Thanks.
your hand is up.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to first of all just commend you, JP, on putting this together. It's it really takes a lot of foresight and planning to think through what kind of data might be useful and how we're going to collect it and actually capture it and really measure the effectiveness of the programs that we're putting into place. So I want to thank you and your team for really putting the thought into building this out in advance. And then I wanted to ask if you could just speak to the flexibility of the system, because I think one thing about data is that often we realize the blind spots in our data, collecting it for a little while, and we realize, oh, wait a minute, that's not actually, we're missing this one piece, or we're not actually capturing this one population or this question that we had. So how flexible is the system as we build it out? And yeah, if you could just speak to that for a moment.
Yeah. So very flexible. So kind of Salesforce and the tools that we are building on top of it are extremely in the Salesforce world, you have configurability and then customization. So configuration is kind of taking the out of the box system and modifying it a little bit. Where, think of it like you move into an apartment and you want to, change the type of dishwasher. So you pull out one dishwasher and you put in another. It doesn't really change anything. Whereas customization is you move into the apartment and you're like, all right, I want the kitchen over here. And now you've kind of replumbed the whole thing, and it makes it a lot harder, the next time you want to do something, because, now the kitchen's in a different place. So Salesforce makes both of those things actually very easy. And there's a whole world of businesses that have evolved to provide those services to people such as us. But we also are going to be hiring in an administrator internally who can do a lot of that configuration, renaming things, adding new fields, structuring how those fields are collecting data. And so the customization kind of going forward to adjust to the mistakes that we will make when we start tracking things that don't end up being important, or not tracking things that we actually find to be important, that will be kind of easy to adjust to. And the biggest challenge will be, okay, now we've got this data that we're not collecting anymore, and we've got that data which kind of looks like the same thing, but they're actually two different things. So how do we try to make that stack up? But yeah, our ability to continue to change it over time is going to be should be quite easy. And Taj and his team, Taj was at Oracle, I think, for a while, and so he's got a good background as well in those types of systems.
So I want to keep us moving forward, and I don't see any more hands on our side. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this item. Thank you very much, JP. Appreciate it. We'll be in contact, Jane and I, to kind of work with you on this next step as part of our initiative.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
Yep. Our next item is item C6. It's Integrated Resource Plan results. I want to put to the CAC this item. It has a mixed message. It says it's an informational item, and then it also says that we're going to provide advice to the board. So I would like to move this into an action item if the rest of the CAC agrees with that. If not, we can just listen to it as an informational item. Do we have Jane? Do you want to move it?
I would support moving it into an action item.
Okay. Okay. Great.
I have a question. So this item is being agendized at the board meeting on Wednesday?
Yes.
All right.
The integrated resource plan? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
All right.
Okay. So Stephanie, are you going to be presenting this? Who's presenting this to us tonight?
Yes, Stephanie will be presenting, and apologies for the confusion. I think our intention was to present this in a manner that made sense for a CAC recommendation, not as a purely passive informational item. So
Well, that's what we are hoping.
yeah, I know exactly. So anyway, I'm just saying the memo was a little bit lack of clear, but I think our intention was that would be what happened. And I think there was just some lack of clarity in the memo drafting. So I'm glad, thank you for taking that step. I would have recommended it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, apologies for the confusion. So I'll be providing an overview of the results of our integrated resource plan analysis, and then discussing different options for a 2030 clean energy goal that we're asking the board to vote on Wednesday. So we can move to the next slide. Actually, we can just go on from here. Just so that. So this is a high-level summary of the results of the different scenarios that we looked at for our IRP analysis. So if you recall, EBCE took a phased approach for its IRP analysis. So phase one was really about completing our compliance requirements for the commission, and that was filed in September. And that included 2 required greenhouse gas targets. One was EBC's share of a statewide electric sector greenhouse gas emissions target of 46 million metric tons by 2030. And the alternative case that the CPUC asked for was a 38 million metric ton scenario. So we filed both of those with the commission, and then for EBCE's internal analysis, we wanted to look across a broader range of greenhouse gas targets and specifically at more ambitious greenhouse gas goals. So scenarios 1 and 2 are similar to what was filed with the CPUC. we ended up, to make things comparable across the whole range of greenhouse gas targets, we made, we kind of calibrated the 46 and the 38 with EBCE's assumptions, so that we can look at a table like this and have it be consistent and make sense. So let's see, the top row here is the percentage of EBCE's projected energy needs that are filled by carbon-free energy in 2030. And so you can see that that is progressively increasing as the greenhouse gas target goes down. I'll mention the last scenario 4 there, the net zero. I don't know if I've talked about that with you all before. So that's basically saying, over the course of a year, EBCE is supplying or purchasing enough greenhouse gas free energy to meet our load needs. So that's why it's net zero million metric tons, because it's across the course of the year. So obviously in that scenario, we're at 100% in 2030. The next row speaks a little bit to affordability, although this is looking at a snapshot. So it's a snapshot of 2030 costs, starting with scenario 1, that around 600 million are the total portfolio costs of that scenario. And then as we move to the right, the costs are reflected as a percentage increase of those total costs. So you can see it, it's a relatively modest increase, certainly from 46 to 38, and then it starts to kind of pick up a little bit as we get into deeper reductions. But as we'll see in the next slide, the incremental costs to achieve these lower greenhouse gas targets on this kind of net accounting basis, does account for a relatively, there are significant other costs associated with the portfolio that we'll see in the next slide. But the other thing to keep in mind is that there's also a trade-off. So even with a 6 or a 14% increase in costs in 2030, that represents investments that EBCE is making to achieve those targets that could otherwise be put into other efforts. So just something to keep in mind. The bottom 3 rows, so essentially, like I mentioned, in order to keep the results comparable, we have the same long-term portfolio of resources that kind of serves as the base for all of these scenarios. And then the incremental greenhouse gas reductions are really achieved by the short-term, the makeup of the short-term contracts that are required to fill the gap between what that long-term portfolio provides and the total amount of energy needed. Sorry, I can talk a little bit more on the table in the previous slide. Thanks. So that long-term portfolio is a majority of our energy needs by 2030. It's around 62%. And so that lines up with what the long-term portfolio in our CPUC filing also had for the 46 million metric ton scenario. So some kind of consistency across those. And that's also provides the majority of our resource adequacy needs, although there is some incremental purchases that we would need from the market to fill that. So now we can go to the next slide. Thanks. So this is our estimate of the total portfolio costs, including what we're projecting for next year. And these are represented in real 2020 dollars. And kind of the warmer colors at the top that grow in magnitude, those are the increased costs to achieve each incremental greenhouse gas target. So the costs are really, of our looking at the total portfolio, the costs are primarily from the long-term contracts. The remaining cost to just, buy energy of any form to serve our load. And then those green, yellow, orange, and red bars are achieving the difference in the greenhouse gas targets. And next slide.
Stephanie
Yes.
or Mary, are we allowed to ask clarifying questions or we have to wait till the very end?
Oh, I'm happy to answer questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I think my preference is to wait to present, and then Monica, please hold. We'll have public and then we'll ask our questions at the end of this. This is your last slide, isn't it, Stephanie?
It is, yeah. Thanks, Mary. Sorry. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, this is the last slide, and it's just listing out some considerations for a 2030 clean energy goal. So like I said, under all of the scenarios we looked at, the long-term portfolio is the same. And the difference is really the makeup of those short-term transactions. And just kind of translating the greenhouse gas targets into a percentage clean energy goal, because it's a little bit easier to understand. At our forecasted loads, currently 80% clean energy lines up with the proportional share of that 30 million metric ton scenario. And let's see, that, I mentioned the kind of trade-offs and opportunity cost of achieving a higher percent clean versus other EPCE goals that we would want to pursue. And so kind of in light of that, the goal will be kind of revisited. We want to ensure that we're maintaining optionality, and that whatever goal is adopted kind of continues to represent what's in EPCE customers' best interest.
Thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie, do we have any public comment?
Just a moment, I have to get my screen.
Mary, I just want to make one very brief comment, sort of as sort of the final point on this agenda item. So while you're pulling it up.
Yep, please do.
I guess what I want to say is, I think this item, there's a lot of technical detail in here, which, is really important when you're thinking about integrated resource planning. And so I think rightly, we've sort of structured this in a kind of quite technocratic way, because that's what, we do. But I do think, I just want to highlight that what we're really talking about here is the East Bay going to set one of the most aggressive clean energy goals in the world. East Bay Community Energy would be the second largest energy provider in California, behind only SMUD, to set 100% clean energy by 2030. Others are 2035 or 2040 or 2045. And then certainly nationally and certainly internationally, there are very few energy providers of our size serving over 1.5 million people who are setting such an aggressive target. So from my perspective, if the board acts to do this, this is sort of a historical moment of local, state, and even global clean energy progress. So anyway, just wanted to make that point to sort of highlight, the important work that's happening here.
Great, thank you. Stephanie, do we have any public comments?
Yes, I have Alita Dupree and Barbara Stebbins has raised her hand. Alita, your microphone is available.
Thank you, Chair Mary Sutter and members. Alita Dupree for the record. I'm going to be aspirational here. Ideally, I'd like to see us do the 100% clean energy goal in a 0 metric ton scenario. Hopefully we can be affordable as well, because I don't want to see us selling 100% clean energy and then no one can afford it, and then they end up using fossil fuels and like gas stoves and still driving gasoline cars and gas heat and things like that. So I'd like to try for the 100% clean. If we can't make it, then at least go for the 80%, because ultimately the goal is to sell as many clean kilowatt hours as we can, because I want the pie to be big as possible, because unfortunately 100% of nothing is nothing. So let's get a high enough number where we can preserve the affordability so we don't risk customer defections and we can keep equity in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. Barbara?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. I hadn't planned on talking on this item, and I apologize for not signing up ahead of time. I think it's just really important. We have become more and more aware because we put equity as a priority at the trade-off often between rapid decarbonization and equity. And I think in thinking about aggressive goals, we're really all in favor of rapid decarbonization, but not at the expense of equity or at the expense of resiliency either. So I think one of the things that Californians are becoming very aware of is what it costs to have most of the energy, electricity that we use being supplied from remote areas. And there's costs actually in dollars as well, because of the cost of transmission to get that remote energy to us, but especially in terms of like shutoffs and what it costs, especially to those people who can least afford it. And the other cost is really the lost benefits to our local communities when we don't prioritize local development, which I'm sure is way more expensive. So that would not be a rapid way to decarbonize at an affordable and maintain affordability. So there needs to be a balance, and I think we recognize that. But we also, the reason that we worked so hard to establish this agency was because of the real potential for local development to bring economic and especially equitable economic benefits to communities that have been most left out of any clean energy economy. And we are increasingly concerned about certain programs like rapid electrification of all existing buildings, for instance, that really do threaten low-income communities, vulnerable communities, people of color communities, in a way that would be a terrible sacrifice in some move to rapidly decarbonize. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. So I'm going to move for comments from the CAC, and Monica, I know you had a question, so if you could go, and then I think Cynthia, your hand is up, and so you'll be after Monica.
I actually have several questions, and I don't know, Stephanie, do you mind putting your slides back up? Starting with just to kind of, and I may have missed this in the beginning, I apologize, but remind me when EBCE submitted their IRP to the CPUC, what was the portfolio, I guess, of choice that you guys indicated, and how does it relate to the scenarios of the different portfolios you're looking at here?
Yeah, so we indicated that we were, likely of the two that we filed. We didn't file an alternative to the two that were required by the CPUC. And so of those two, we indicated that our procurement was more likely to be in line with the 38 MMT, but also that would, be a decision that the board would make.
Right. And then
let me just maybe highlight that the way we very sort of explicitly structured the approach of this to overlay with the PUC filing. So under both the 30 MMT and the 100% clean, we maintain the long-term contract parameters that were largely put in place under the 46 and the 38 MMT scenarios, because we don't want to tell the PUC that, hey, we're doing one thing, and then here we're pursuing a wholly different
Right.
long-term infrastructure investment strategy.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. I guess I should have started off with, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I think this is very well done. And I'm just so used to talking to you in a different way that I forget that I have to say that in this role. So thank you so much for this presentation. I think another question is, EBCE brought to the CAC and to the board earlier, I think it was this year, a policy on carbon free to basically be somewhat consistent with PG&E in terms of the RPS target and carbon free target. And so how does that mesh with this? Is this intended to be a replacement of what may have been just an interim policy to tie ourselves to PG&E? Or is that policy subsumed somehow in one of these scenarios?
That is I would call that an interim policy, or a policy that we really are focusing on, the next couple years. I think one, as we start to transition from, the current dynamic to one where we've worked through all of the reallocation or rebalancing of the portfolio through the PCIA, as we start to bring on, the various tranches of resources that we've contracted for, and then, certainly as the RPS requirements step up, what we're really pointing to here is a fairly rapid from now to 2025, and even further from 25 to 30, progression from, being 5% more renewable than PG&E today to being 100% clean in 2030.
I think maybe what would be useful is to have that mix or that breakout between RPS and non-RPS build out through 2030 in the different scenarios. That would also add a little bit more flavor to that. And then my other question has to do with the cost. So these costs that you're projecting in 2020, with the base case of 600 million, is that a net cost? Does it incorporate the revenues that you would get from the resources? Or is it just the cost of the resources themselves?
Yeah, these are net costs.
Okay. And then my other question is around planning for or integrating, the real I in IRP is integrating demand side and behind the meter resources, including local-ish or local offered or options. Is any of that included within any of the scenarios? And if so, how did you treat local resources or behind the meter solutions?
Yep. So in the optimization of the long-term portfolio, we have a behind the meter solar plus storage resource. So that can be selected by the model, and it is selected. Basically, it's less cost effective than in front of the meter solar plus storage, but it still provides a number of benefits. So in that sense, it's incorporated. And then we also incorporate our targets for energy efficiency. Embedded in our load forecast are our targets for electrification of transportation and buildings. So because of that, the load forecast that we use in our analysis is about 1 terawatt higher than in the CPUCs. So that which kind of makes it that much harder to achieve a volumetric greenhouse gas target. So those are the primary ways. Yeah.
Okay, my last question, I promise, is I guess you guys are obviously, you're on a path to doing something because you're procuring now. And I think what I heard maybe Nick saying earlier is that the path or the staff recommendation might be for scenario 4, or do you have, does staff have a recommendation between these different scenarios that were laid out?
we don't have a recommendation. It's really scenario 3 or scenario 4 are, I think the primary option. Certainly scenario 1 and 2 are sort of the base case. No board action is necessary if the thinking is that scenario 1 and 2 are going to be the options, because we have to achieve either scenario 1 or 2 under PUC requirements. What this is really is for the board to give us indicate whether they want a more aggressive target, albeit a target that fits into the PUC construct, and whether that should be effectively 80% or effectively 100%. And we try to lay out the trade-offs, and it's roughly $50 million a year of excess procurement costs. I will say, setting a target, especially if it's not tied to, we're not entering into long-term contracts today to meet 100% of our clean energy requirement in 2030. It's going to be an iterative process. So certainly there are going to be at least every other year, if not every year, check-in points to see whether, gosh, if that marginal cost of getting from 95 to 100 is so expensive, and we determine at some point that it's better to use that to pursue other carbon abatement strategies, that we've tried to build an approach here that maintains optionality as we get closer and closer to 2030 and have more visibility into actual costs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia, I think you're next, and then Anne Olivia. And there you go.
Okay, great. Let me go back. What I would like to ask is, I'm having some internet problems here. Can we afford scenario 3 and scenario 4? Because that's what I would prefer to be looking at.
And Cynthia, when you say afford, do you mean that we would be able to do this without raising rates substantially, or rates higher than PG&E?
Yeah. Essentially that. I mean, can the organization, afford it? I mean, what would, I would like to see us, use renewable energy, more the green component, sooner than later. And so, I mean, for instance, is scenario 4 feasible? I mean, if we chose scenario 4, what are the obstacles? I obviously know it costs more, but what would be the considerations of the organization?
Yeah, Cynthia, the considerations, really are certainly as we get closer, and I would say generally, it's in 2025, 2026, 2027 is that when you have to start making the purchase decisions to get to that 100% level. You want to evaluate, what are your costs relative to PG&E's costs? What are your procurement costs relative to other options to invest in things that are going to reduce pollution and reduce emissions? And that's the consideration. And I think whether you adopt option 2, 3, or 4, we're maintaining that ability to evaluate and iterate as we proceed. In all scenarios, we have to achieve, we have to achieve the scenario 1. That is by state law. So in the very immediate term, because scenario 1 entails a very significant amount of new renewables build out, I would say over the next couple of years, we're really going to be focused on building and contracting for and building those resources, and continually sort of re-looking at where we think prices are, how our the competitive landscape relative to PG&E. And, so is that helpful? Cynthia?
So, yeah, it is helpful. So what I'm hearing is that at this point, I mean, it would be difficult to say that we should move to option 4 because there are things that, right now we can't, they're speculative at best is what I'm hearing. But I would like to say that I think our goal should be option 4. And I think that, yearly, maybe this can come back for review, but it's difficult, to look 10 years down the road also. But I think our goal should be as much renewable energy with local development as possible. So, I just don't want to meet what the state guideline is. I want us to try to exceed it, perhaps even earlier if it's possible. So what I'm saying is I don't think our goal should just to meet the state standard. I think if we're able to go beyond that, that's what we should strive for. But again, it's 10 years from now, so it's hard to say, what all the cost factors are.
Thank you, Cynthia. Anne Olivia, Ernie, and then Jane.
Thank you so much. This really is a great presentation, and I'm grateful for all of this. I have one question about public outreach and input, and would actually just like to put my support in for scenario 3. Environmental organizations kind of strongly believe that this is the scenario that we need to hit in order to achieve our SB 100 2045 target, but it also allows us to have a managed decline. It can be 80% and we can do better than that, but I would rather see us really keep that equity component in mind while doing what we need to environmentally. So my question around the outreach component, though, is the IRP got brought forward in August, I think, and there wasn't time to do a robust public engagement process because the turnaround time was just too fast. And so I'm wondering if there is going to be a robust public engagement process beyond just having it come to this meeting to look at the plan and then solicit feedback from our area on that plan.
Yeah, so we did have host a webinar last week where we invited a number of the environmental and environmental justice organizations that have been engaged in the IRP at the CPUC. And so, we kind of gave them a comprehensive overview of the results, and it's certainly my intention to circle back if a goal is adopted and update them on that. And then, I also express willingness to answer any questions or host another webinar at any point.
And how did you decide? I mean, so this public engagement process was by invitational as opposed to open. Cynthia, just so you know, your microphone is still on.
Yeah, we just reached out to the organizations that are involved in the IRP proceeding at the CPUC. And then I also asked them if any of their colleagues at any other organizations would be interested. So I tried to cast a wide net, but in terms of publicly available, then this is more the venue for that.
So some environmental groups that I work with who are interested in this item were giving inquiry about the public engagement process. So there is more interest perhaps, and maybe we could try and connect you with some of those things. It would be great if we could have an open public input process on this as opposed to an invitational, just because it's fascinating and it's fantastic. So I'm not trying to sound negative on that. This is really great, and I'm really excited to see these options going forward that are more than what was filed before. Really exciting stuff, super for it. Strong supporter really of going with scenario 3 to give us the flexibility to do better than that, but also keeping the equity component in mind. And also, I believe there are more people who are interested in being engaged in the input process. And so would encourage that kind of forum that would allow that.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
Great. Thank you, Olivia. Ernie, and then Jane, and I will remind the CAC this is an action item. So at some point, it'd be good to hear a motion that we can discuss, and also that our next item is going to be also one that we're going to want to talk about a fair amount. So please keep that in mind as you have your points. Ernie, and then Jane.
Sure. A comment and then a question. First of all, it's really heartening to see that it's looking like scenario 3 and 4 are the 2 realistic options that we might adopt. Thank you, staff and everyone, for bringing this to us and working to get us to this point. For moving forward. As someone who kind of lives in a calm state of perpetual climate panic, like Greta Thunberg, I'm for 100% all the time. I mean, I just am. But like Barbara Stedman's comment and Anna Lydia were saying, equity, is one of our pillars, and it needs to be. And resiliency, we're heading into just the fact of firestorms every year, and the closer the better. And I think we're going to achieve, obviously more equity and resiliency with local build out. So I would prefer scenario 3 for those reasons. But I'm question for Nick. You were talking about under scenario 4, scenario where getting up to that those last few percentages up to 100, pursuing other carbon abatement strategies. What are you referring to on that?
I think it's relevant for scenario 3 or scenario 4, frankly, right? It's when you talk about resiliency or equity programs, those are not necessarily simply focused on procuring renewables or clean energy, right? They're focused on building something locally to create jobs, building something locally that may have a co-benefit of resilience to enhance local reliability. And so I think we have focused on in each of these scenarios, beyond those that comply with the requirements set by the PUC, is a time scale that allows us to continually evaluate the changing landscape. There's a price landscape, how are technology prices changing? How is the market changing? Certainly in 5 or 10 years, we may find ourselves not competing with PG&E, strictly speaking, on cost, because PG&E may not be offering the same services that it offers in 10 years. 10 years ago, one would not have predicted that in 2020, more than 50% of PG&E load was served by a CCA. So in 2030, I'll tell you, it's not going to look like it does today. I don't know what it's going to look like. I can't predict that, but I know that it does. So in all approaches, we want to make sure that we provide more than enough opportunity for us to continually evaluate. And so that's what I'm referencing there. So to the points that you and Olivia and Cynthia are making about wanting to ensure consideration of equity, I think that that's built into the design irrespective of the target.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ernie.
Mary, I would like to make a motion.
Cynthia, not yet. Jane is up, and then I will come back to you. Thank you. Jane?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to echo just, just kudos to the EBCE team for putting this together. This is just so amazing and really inspiring to even be having these conversations, as a community here in the East Bay. I just feel really proud to be part of this, and want to thank you guys for putting this forth. And I think I appreciate the comments that Barbara brought up and that have been repeated by others, this tension between rapid decarbonization, doing things fast and that sense of urgency, and also doing it right, and ensuring that we're building we're building out the future that is best going to serve the intention behind EBCE and the long-term interests of the community. And that's a really thorny question, right? Of is kind of rapid and immediate decarbonization, how does that goal weigh against, some of the, perhaps more complicated and thoughtful and time-consuming goals of a just transition. So, I don't expect that we'll get to like an easy answer to that, but I just appreciate that we're having the conversation. And I think one of the things that may be helpful in thinking through, how we negotiate that tension and kind of come to decisions as a community, it would be helpful to know, like, what is our potential as a community for, resource adequacy? Like, what are our best avenues to getting to, the maximum possible local, energy creation, procurement, distribution right here without having to go anywhere else. And, what is that potential and what would that cost? And I think that can help, relativize a number like 85 million, to get to 100%. And, it seems likely that, because we have both industry and residential in our load area, that and not to mention all the transportation, needs in our local economy, that there will always be external resources that we will need to incorporate into our energy portfolio. So really having an understanding and clearer picture of how, how that piece, weighs against what we could possibly, dream up in terms of local adequacy, and what the cost of that kind of local energy creation is, maybe something that helps guide our decision making, as we move forward and balancing out the different priorities. And I think, with that in mind, I think I would probably be in favor of, at least right now, the option 3, and really kind of allowing us the opportunity to balance those priorities as you kind of learn more about how to, successfully implement just transition, and really ensure that we're not rushing forward with urgency at the cost of, a just transition.
So Cynthia, I'm going to say my piece because I haven't had a chance to yet, and then I'm going to come back to you for a motion. But I will say I actually support scenario 4. And the reason I do is from what I've heard, the resource mix and the risk management and the reliability is the same, regardless of which scenario we're looking at. The other thing that if you look at the graphics, the total portfolio costs, I think that you don't start getting a significant amount of additional costs, from my understanding of getting to this zero greenhouse gas, which is that orange top, until about 2026, 2025. This is 2020, 2021. I feel like we can put this as a goal, as the plan, because plans can change. But my support and my belief is that the choice of going after a zero net greenhouse gas will not adversely affect the other aspects. I could be wrong about that, but that's kind of where I'm coming from. And so with that and my say, Cynthia, I'll put it to you for a motion.
Thank you, Mary, for motivating the motion that I was about to make, which is that I move that we select option 4 and a secondary secondary that we look at option 3 has a backup. And then I would like to see this item come to both the CAC and the JPA board annually for review. So that's my, that's my motion.
So I'm gonna, I've written this here, Cynthia, please tell me if I've captured it right, that the CAC supports and recommends option 4 and secondarily option 3 as a backup, with reporting, with EBCE reporting back to the CAC and the board annually.
Correct, that's it, thank you.
Okay, do I hear a second on that?
I'll second it. This is Monica.
So that was Monica, seconded. Any further discussions before we call the vote?
Yeah, I do. I guess I do have a question. So I may be misunderstanding what was being presented to us. And so maybe we can get some input from Stephanie or Nick. So knowing that our resources are going to be limited, whatever they are, I think resources are going to really open up over the next couple of years for various reasons, but whatever they are, they're going to be limited. So the way I was reading the chart and understanding the presentation was that there was the implication that if we're committing to 100% by 2030, because of the increased cost, there was a likelihood or an actuality that less money would be available for the local build out and other resiliency efforts. That's how I was understanding it, but I'm hearing kind of different things from different people. Was I misunderstanding that?
So you're not understanding that in 2030, the portfolio cost will be higher. And so, those are dollars that can't be allocated to other uses, local build out, other climate and pollution abatement strategies, jobs creation programs, what have you. So that is accurate, but it is also accurate in the Mary's characterization that the major investments that drive those costs don't start to be made until 2025, 2026. So over the next 5 years, irrespective of whether we adopt scenario 3 or 4, we're on, a very kind of similar trajectory of investing in clean energy, energy storage, what have you. It is in 2025, 2026 that you sort of take one of 3 pathways based on this feedback, and certainly based on sort of more information that we collect.
Okay, thank you. I'll make one more comment. So I'm glad that discussion came out, because that actually does change how I'm thinking about this. I think I will be voting for option 4.
Thank you, Ernie. And Olivia, I see your hand was up.
Yeah, so I'm a super pro environment person and am really dedicated to it, but we haven't seen details on how scenario 4 is being proposed to be achieved. I mean, y'all did a study, and so there are materials I'm not comfortable voting for something that was just described as best in the world without looking at what kinds of trade-offs that mean for our community. I do believe that scenario 3 needs to be a baseline that we can try and shoot beyond it. And since it wouldn't be until 2025, 2026 that we would be making those decisions, giving a clear signal that we want to shoot for at least scenario 3. And then once the materials on how we would look at getting there are made public so that we can read them and take a look at what we're being asked to trade, and we can provide feedback on that, then I would be comfortable moving towards scenario 4. But it seems like making that the target when, as Nick said, the cost of going from 95 to 100% right now, every person believes to be a kind of a ridiculous number. I would love to see the plan for that before I could support it. If we're like, hey, 4 is probably a good idea, but we need to get public input first, let's set 3 as a baseline and see if, since we have all these years, we can move to scenario 4. Great, but I'm really uncomfortable supporting it before then.
Great, thank you, Anna Olivia. So Jane, I don't know if your hand ever went down and you put it back up.
No, that was from before, but I would just say, I agree with Anna Olivia, and I feel that, while I am wholeheartedly behind 100%, I just want to understand more about the trade-offs there and what it means, for our community, and particularly for the most vulnerable people in our community, and think through, whether procuring more energy externally, to get to that 100%. I just want to know more about the trade-offs, if we could use that money instead to have a tangible and meaningful impact on the health and well-being of our neighbors. It's just something that I think we need to know more about before we put a stake in the ground.
Okay, so Monica, I think your hand is up, and then I'd like to call the vote after that, so we can move on with.
And I have a comment also, please.
Cynthia?
Brief comment.
Okay.
Yes.
But you've also had your comments, so Monica, it's your turn.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to make sure that I added a comment too, because I really just asked questions in the beginning. But I support scenario 4 as a kind of an aspirational goal, and it's really not that aspirational, quite frankly. No offense, Nick, but the state goal is to be at 100% carbon free by 2045, and there's already a sense that we're going to get there as a state way before 2045. And many of the CCAs and some of the munis already have a 100% target by 2030, including SVCE is already at 100%. And EBCE was already at 100% as well for a large portion of their portfolio. So I think we can do this. We can be incremental about it and be very kind of deliberate about the procurement decisions that we make as we go along. But setting this as a target, I think it's just a really good signal and message to send out to the, to the world maybe, about what we're about. And that's why I support the motion, or second the motion.
Great, thank you, Monica. So Cynthia, do you have anything else to add, or should we call the vote?
Monica said most of what I wanted to say, but I think in my motion, I did say that we would review this annually, at a minimum. So there is protections there for us to review additional costs, and I do think it is a good aspirational goal for us to try to reach. And so yeah, that's it. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. I'd like to call the vote at this point.
Can I just offer a friendly amendment?
We do have option 3 as a backup. So,
well, I wonder if we could just say something like, in that annual review, option 4 will be evaluated against the goals of a just transition, because I think I would be comfortable voting for it if we had that language there specifically, that like the purpose of the review is to evaluate those trade-offs, vis-a-vis community well-being.
Can I just ask, just for our purposes, if that would indeed be in there and then be recommended to the board, when you're sort of referring to a just transition, is there sort of a specific sort of sub definition to provide, just so if we're going to be evaluating something annually, I want to know, like, is it against local development spend opportunities or jobs creation, or what I guess that would just be my request, is like, if that's going to be in there, something else specific that we can then provide an analysis against.
We actually have that definition adopted into one of the CAC pillars. So I can look that up and send that to you. It makes me feel more comfortable actually with the motion.
So we have a friendly amendment. Cynthia, you were the original.
Sure, that's fine. Sure.
So it's a report back to the board annually around. I mean, I will have to say I don't really support that friendly amendment. I will add it if we want to, and then I may vote now down on this because I think it's too nebulous. I mean, I think that there is all of the options that are going to have to be on the board every time they look at this, and the community aspect and the local development is always going to be part of it. But I will just tell you that's how I'll probably vote, but we can add it.
Well, let me withdraw. Let me withdraw that because it is going to be part of the analysis. So I don't think it's it's implied that it's part of the analysis, and Olivia. So I don't see where that's.
Would you take an amendment that said that the plan for getting to scenario 4 will come back for a robust public engagement process?
Sure. I mean, that's why I did it. I recommended that it be annual. Yes. I mean, yeah.
Can I comment also that just transition? I'm up to my neck working on labor just transition issues, and of course there's more than just labor and just transition, but I like including that term in our previous reference to it. So I'm just saying I would support that amendment.
It kind of what we're at, guys, is an amendment that it sounds like we've had one amendment, and Stephanie Cabrera, please help me out here. In terms of, we had one friendly amendment that was accepted by the original person and then taken back. And then we have a second amendment. So I believe what we have to do is vote kind of on the first one and then the amendments. Is that kind of how we need to go about this?
Yes, what we can do, since there's so many options for amendments, we can go ahead and let this motion run. If it fails, then bring it back with the amendments, or the amendment makers can make their own action and see, or motion, and see if that passes.
Okay, so I think what we need to do then, if I understand you right, Stephanie, we should probably go back to the very original one, absent any friendly, see what happens, and then we could have a second motion to talk about these other two things. Did I understand you right?
Well, you want to make it in one motion would be ideal. So you complete. So in this motion, it would be selecting option 4 with option 3 as the backup, EBC reporting back to the board and CAC annually. And that does not include reporting back to the board on if option 4 has a just transition. So that amendment was not accepted. So we wouldn't even include it in the record.
Oh, I see. Yep. And so it's better to have that plus one of the, plus probably the first friendly amendment, and then we vote on that.
Yes. Okay. But the friendly amendment was not accepted by the motion makers. So in that case, the person making the friendly amendment would then make their own motion if this initial motion fails.
Okay. Thank you. And Olivia's one, we should not even consider at this point. It's kind of a friendly on a friendly. Is that?
No,
right.
What I'm trying to get to is is like we're really close to agreeing and finding the thing that addresses the concerns expressed by the community and the members of this body. Because we're saying, okay, this would be great, but there's not enough information here, and there's some concerns about the scenario. So what I was trying to do is take away the lack of present definition for just transition and the potential redundancy, and replace it with a standard process of robust public engagement so that everyone's concerns are addressed, that there will be a process for doing so, but it doesn't tie us down into any particular way to do that. So it would be instead of Ernie's amendment, or instead of the amendment for the analysis in reference to a just transition, but having a robust public engagement process might address all of those concerns and allow staff to get feedback before bringing forth the next year's thing. So if that is accepted, then I think we can move forward on it. If not, whatever, it's fine.
Okay, so the motion now as it stands is Cynthia's original
Yes.
motion. Jane's motion, Jane's friendly amendment was not accepted. Are you accepting Anna Olivia's amendment to add
Yeah.
having a robust
Yeah.
public engagement?
Yes, yes, I am. Yes, I
Okay,
am.
so now the motion would be select option 4 and consider option 3 as a backup, with EBCE reporting back to the BOD and CAC annually and having a robust public engagement. I'm seconding this motion.
I will.
That's, yep.
Yes, okay.
Okay, can you call the vote, please?
Did you ask me a question, Stephanie?
Yes, if you were going to continue seconding that motion as it stands. You're also accepting the changes.
And who's to define robust public engagement? I guess that'll be be determined by somebody.
Yes.
Okay. But it could involve just bringing it to the CAC. If I want to clarify. Okay.
It can depend on what is considered robust.
Okay. That's the problem I'm having with the amendment to the motion, is that there's just a lot of subjectivity to it. But if I could, I don't know if I'm allowed to modify that in any way, but if it's just to clarify that robust will be determined by the CEO or by the community advisory committee. It has to have something else there. Otherwise, it's just a nothing. And I'm okay accepting it, knowing that it's a nothing, by the way.
So
As
we've had
clarification, robust public engagement is actually a term. It does have a meaning. What it means is that you do whatever is appropriate so that you would hold a meeting that wasn't by invitational only.
That's not what robust public engagement means. That's what you interpret it as being, but I don't think that that's a definition anywhere.
There is, I'm kind of looking.
So, hey, folks, we're not going to argue what robust is. We have an amendment, or we have a motion, an amendment. I'd like to vote because we have another item to talk about, and we have 15 minutes left in today's meeting, supposedly. And the next one I know is going to be a lot of discussion as well, and is an action item for us.
So I guess I do not accept that amendment because it's not clear to me what it means.
All right.
I would second that. I would second the amendment with the, I'm sorry, I would second the motion
We
with the
can
amendment.
even drop the word robust if it is too vague. Just a public engagement process.
Yeah.
Okay, because I will accept that because the board and the community advisory committee is a public engagement body.
Okay, so Cynthia, do you accept that without the word robust?
Yes, I mean, it is, I mean, the fact that it's coming back annually, and Olivia, and means that there's a forum there for community input. I mean, that's why I wanted to come back both to the CAC and the JPA board annually, and it will be agendized. And so that's the opportunity there for the, for both our committee, the board and the community at large to give their input. So, it's somewhat redundant. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but it's somewhat redundant because it is implied in the motion. That's why I said to be reviewed annually.
Stephanie, please call a vote.
Yes. This will include the motion and amendment makers. Eldred?
And it's the motion Cynthia made with the community engagement piece, right?
Correct.
Yes.
I think she said yes, Stephanie.
I did say
sure.
yes, yeah.
Yes, yeah, I got Anna Olivia. I'm just waiting for Ernie Pacheco.
Yes, sorry to hear you call my name. Yes.
Thank you. Padilla?
Yes.
Landry?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Sutter?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, folks. All right.
Great job.
Our next item is also another action item for us. It is carbon-free allocation. And we're going to be hearing from Nick, I believe, in terms of acceptance of large hydroelectric generation allocation for 2021, and also options they come back with for monetizing the nuclear generation.
Yep, thank you. Jim will be sharing the slides and walking through, and then Jim and I will answer questions that folks may have.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm Jim Dorrance. I'm on the Power Resources team, and I'm going to talk through the 2021 carbon-free allocation. Next slide, please. So the carbon-free allocation, so I'm going to give some background to kind of what this is, and then I'll talk explicitly about 2021. And so EBCE has an eligible LLC. We can purchase carbon-free energy from PG&E as part of the PCI process, and we purchase this for a 1-year term. Energy can be either from resources of PG&Es that are large hydroelectric, or from their nuclear resources, or both. And so you select one or the other, or each. And so for deliveries in the current year, for 2020, the EBCE board directed staff to only accept the large hydroelectric energy. And this was purchased from PG&E as part of this process for $0. So through this process, through the carbon-free allocation, each year, we select the type of generation that we're going to take for next year's delivery. So right now, what we're talking about is the energy that will be delivered in 2021. And so this is a decision in regards to that part of the allocation. Next slide, please. So let's talk about specifically about the 2021 carbon-free allocation. So what we're bringing to the board is we're asking for approval to accept the large hydroelectric generation from the carbon-free allocation for delivery in 2021. This is the same thing we accepted for 2020. But additionally, we're presenting a method for monetizing the nuclear generation from this allocation. We're seeking board approval of one of two choices. The first being the rejection of the nuclear allocation from PG&E, or to accept the nuclear allocation for 2021 and then resell the content to a third party, where proceeds from this relationship could be budgeted towards local development programs. And so we would accept the nuclear, but then it would be sold to another party that would then market it on our behalf. That's kind of the big pretense of what we're bringing to the board. Next slide, please. There you go. So again, we talked about, first part is taking the large hydroelectric for 2021, and the second part is the decision regarding the nuclear energy. And so I'm going to talk through some of the mechanics of the relationship we would have with the marketer and the nuclear energy sale. And so with board approval, we would accept the nuclear energy for 2021. At the same time, we'd enter into an agreement where we would sell the energy and the attribute to a third party as discussed. We would structure this arrangement with the energy supplier where they would purchase all of the energy from EBCE at $0 At the same time, take title to the full quantity of energy that we are allocated from PG&E. The marketer would then work to resell the energy, and we would receive half of the net revenue from any sale made of that energy. And so we would take it from PG&E, we'd sell it to a marketer. That marketer would sell it on our behalf, and we'd receive 50% of those profits. If the energy supplier is not able to resell a product or any portion of it, they would retain the energy themselves. This goes back to the original bullet where we talk about the marketer taking title to the energy. I know there's a lot of pieces in this one, but hopefully I'm explaining it clearly enough. And so with that, all the energy would transfer to the marketer, and EBC would not have any reporting obligation on our power content label. So any allocation we accept from PG&E would not show up on our power content label for 2021. Next slide, please. So now we can talk about some of the potential revenues from this arrangement. And so as mentioned, EBCE would receive 50% of the net profits. And we estimate that these profits could be somewhere from $500,000 to $1 million. But again, these would be based on, a lot of maybes based on the resale value and the amount that is sold by the marketer. In discussions with this entity, there's indication that there is a market and interest for this product. So we think that there is a robust sale opportunity, not to recycle a word from the last one, but we see that that exists. And that any proceeds can come from the resale, can go towards, as mentioned, local development, increased renewable procurement, or to the general operating budget as well. So the table here that you see are some projections based on certain quantities of sold energy from the allocation and then a range of prices. At the top, we see that if all the energy was resold at a high price of $3, it could be 2 million. If the price is less and the resold quantity is less, then the price also goes down. And when I say price, I mean the revenue to EBCE that we'd be able to use for the above mentioned activities. Next slide, please. So there's two kind of parts to this. There's one, the potential revenue stream that EBCE can receive for this arrangement. And the other is power content, which is very important to everyone and a big deal to us here as well. And so we want to speak explicitly about how receiving the allocation from PG can affect their power content label. And so the power source disclosure regulations, within their rules, they allow reporting entities to disclose only the amount of generation that matches their sales. And so what that means is someone like PG&E, where they have an excess of generation more than sales, there are components of their portfolio they're not obligated to report, and that is natural gas. And so if they have an excess amount of carbon-free generation, they don't have to disclose the natural gas that they've purchased as part of their portfolio. This idea is that if we receive and choose to accept the allocation, it would remove carbon-free generation from their portfolio, and in turn, they would most likely be displaying more natural gas on their power content label due to EBCE accepting the allocation. So on PG&E's 2019 PCL, Power Source Disclosure Report, there was 13 terawatt hours of natural gas generation, and this was not disclosed on their PCL. And this is, again, due to the mechanics of how this stuff is counted in the PSDR, with their generation being greater than their retail sales. They did disclose the other content, including the nuclear generation within their portfolio. And so choosing to accept the nuclear energy would lower the amount of carbon-free content on PG&E's PCL, and therefore more natural gas would be disclosed when they report. We did some math based on the 2019 numbers. If we were to accept our allocation, as much as 2% would have been shown on their power content label in 2019 that was not, due to the excess of carbon-free generation they had versus their retail sales. I think that's about the end of what I have there. You can go to the next slide, Stephanie. Thank you. So I'll now obviously open up to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to first go to the public for any comments. And Stephanie, do we have very many folks lined up?
I have two speakers, Alita Dupree and Barbara Stebbins.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's have Barbara go first this time. So Barbara and then Alita.
Okay, I think you Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I'll start by saying East Bay Clean Power Alliance does not support EBCE dealing with nuclear energy. It is not clean energy. For all the reasons we've said before, we don't support this proposal any more than the other two that have been brought before EBCE, CAC, and the board. We really feel that this is just has too much similarity to like the drug cartels where they accept the drugs from the people who produce them and then hand them off to the dealer, you know, because we see nuclear as a very dangerous and dirty kind of energy. So we do, if we don't think we should have it in our mix, we don't think that other entities should have it in their mix either. So we are not in support of this proposal at all. The other thing we'd like to point out is that November 22nd in 2019 in the executive committee meeting, Nick Chasset said we might have to pay somebody to take it, indicating what we already know, which is that there may be a market for nuclear, but it is clearly not a robust market for nuclear, as was clear from the chart that you just saw, showing that it goes all the way down to 50 cents per megawatt hour from what way back when it was first introduced as a possibility for EBCE, we were told it would save us $8 per megawatt hour. So clearly the value of nuclear is going down fast. The last thing I want to point out, which is slightly complicated, even though staff is saying that PG&E might make up the nuclear power that EBCE takes by declaring gas-fired power on their power content label, we don't think that's actually the most likely scenario. If PG&E served the same amount of nuclear energy that they are currently serving customers now, or did in 2019, if they served that same amount to customers in 2021, the percent renewable would go from 29 to 34 because they are continuing to lose customers. So they don't really have to have excess renewable, which we're pretty sure they do. They can just stay with what they have, and because their customer base is decreasing, actually, they will be able to make up percentages with renewable energy if they lose nuclear. So I'll stop there, but we have submitted a letter to the board and to you that have a number of other arguments about why we think this is just really a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Alita?
Thank you, Chair Mary Sutter and members. Alita Dupree for the record. I mean, this is very important and it is transactional. I do support taking the hydro because hydro is there and it's not perfect and it's not ideal. Some may disagree with me, but hydro does not produce greenhouse gas emissions at the point of generation. And so certainly I think taking the hydro is a reasonable way for us to get our clean power percentage up. While I would personally rather we not deal with nuclear, still I think that if we can structure a transaction where we pass it through and it doesn't impact the power label, the content, I would favor that. Again, some would disagree with me, but your board does have a fiduciary responsibility. And part of that is to search for deals. And I'm not particularly ideological about it because ultimately the end of the day is to produce both clean and affordable power for the people of the EBCE service territory. So I think that it seems like there's confidence that we can have a transaction in order to pass through the nuclear and get something which we can use to further the goal of EBCE. This isn't about being ideological, but about being practical. So I favor accept the hydro allocation in full. And though it is difficult, structure a transaction to pass through the nuclear in a way that it does not impact the power content label. And as a result, we can preserve our brand. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. Stephanie, do we have any other speakers?
We have no other speakers for this item.
Okay. Then I'm going to open it up to.
Apologies, Chair. I do see Jessica's raising her hand.
Okay, great. Jessica?
Jessica, your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. Jessica Tovari, Space Clean Power Alliance. And I do want to add, well, 2 points. The first point is that one of the units in Diablo Canyon has actually been recently been, I guess I want to say retrofitted for an exorbitant amount of money. And it has been on and offline because even though it's been retrofitted, it is no longer operating. It keeps breaking down. And it reminds me of when you have like a really old car and you take it to the mechanic and the mechanic says, well, I can fix it. It's going to be very expensive and I can't guarantee you that the car will keep going. It might make more sense to just get a new car. And so I feel like that's one issue. And then the second issue is when we take the energy from PG&E, we're legitimizing the PCIA and the terms that they have put under the power charge and difference adjustment, which is costing customers, community choice customers, a lot of money. It is subsidizing PG&E's operations and the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. It is pretty much a money pit. Certainly, there are so many charges from PG&E that are absolutely ridiculous that we're forced to pay. So I just want to highlight that what we're doing here is talking about taking energy from a company that has not been friendly to community choice customers and is not is setting terms that I think are very dangerous, actually. We shouldn't be doing PG&E any favors. We should be looking out for community choice customers. Taking both the hydro and the nuclear is legitimizing these costs. The new car we need to be buying right now really is this clean energy future that we keep talking about to create jobs, to actually transform our communities and bring the benefits that we need here at home. It is officially about 14 months that we've been talking about nuclear energy, and over again. This is a huge waste of time and money on behalf of East Bay Community Energy. We need to stop this madness and begin to do the good things for our community. And that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. So just to, as we open it up to the CAC members, to remind us, in front of us, we want to provide the board with two things. One, whether or not we believe the board should accept the large hydro generation. That's the first one. And then the second thing that we want to indicate to them is whether or not they should either reject the nuclear allocation or accept the nuclear allocation and resell the content to a third party. Those are the 2 points that are under the recommendation in that memo. So those are kind of the two things that we want to discuss. And I think I saw Aunt Olivia's
Me
hand
too.
is up, as is Cynthia's.
Yes,
Mary,
excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
I do see Audrey has raised her hand for public comment as well.
Okay. We'll hear Audrey, and then we'll come back to the CAC. Audrey?
Thank you so much. Stephanie, I really appreciate your quick eyes. I hadn't planned to make a comment, but I find this proposal extremely cynical, and I'm quite disappointed in the way the staff has presented it. One of the things that Jessica mentioned was the PCIA, which is just hammering all of us, all CCAs. On that grounds alone, we should be suspicious. But what really bothers me is that staff holds out this rather vague idea that maybe then this little profit that we could make on this transaction could support local development. This is extremely, it's extremely cynical to me, and I'm so surprised that this comes up again. Also, I wanted to make the point that that Alida Dupree made. That is to say, I want to contradict what he has to say. He seems to equate ideological with sort of having no ethics at all. It's absolutely something else to do something just for the sake of price. We're competing to get to the bottom. It's just very upsetting, especially when you think of all those of nuclear generation to begin with, the problems it's having finding equitable price in other parts of the country, and especially when you think of all the abandoned uranium mining sites on the Navajo reservation, for example. There are just dozens of them that the federal government just is ignoring. So for all of these reasons, I thought we had agreed that using nuclear power, nuclear generation, and furthering its existence is really anathema to our purpose as a CCA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Audrey. Okay, with that, I think we'll move it back to the CAC. And those are the two things that are kind of in front of us. I will say that Aunt Olivia, and then Cynthia, and then Monica.
If you want, I can go towards the end. Some of my questions are sort of technical, and I'm happy to wait and see if other folks ask some of those things first.
Sure. Cynthia, and then Monica.
Yes, a number of things here. There is no price tag on our vision of East Bay community energy, and there's no price tag for our integrity either. And what I mean by that is, for a potential profit of 500,000 to 1 million, we are risking losing ratepayers. Yes, I guess it doesn't have to be on the power content label, but I just there's a lack of transparency here that could lead to distrust in the community at large. Both the CAC and the JPA board have many of us, including at public comment have spoken out against nuclear energy. And I think the risk to our reputation and for what we stand for is at risk by accepting the nuclear allocation from PG&E. And I would like to see this put to rest. And I don't think our organization is in a desperate need of 500,000 to 1 million. So I speak adamantly against the acceptance of nuclear energy from PG&E, and also SEIU Local 1021 is on a board officially, has a large organization opposing the nuclear allocation. I think that perhaps we should reject all future offers from PG&E, including the large hydro. But since we have voted for the large hydro for this year, and only for this year, I would accept the large hydro, or I think the committee should consider accepting the large hydro, simply because that's what we voted on, and I think our votes, whatever we vote for, should carry forward. I mean, there's integrity to our voting. So so I'm ready to move this item, Mary, whenever you want me to move it.
Okay, I think I would like to hear from a couple other members first, but I may come back to you. So Monica
sure.
and Olivia, thank you for offering.
Yeah, so first, I want to thank staff for continuing to bring a very sensitive and not popular topic to this committee and ultimately to the board. I don't wish this on anybody. It's not a fun thing to talk, but I think it's your obligation to this organization to bring these opportunities to the board and to the community, because at the end of the day, these are resources, whether it's large hydro or nuclear, that our ratepayers are already paying for and not getting any benefit because we pay for it as part of the PCIA, and PG&E gets to continue to count these towards their portfolio and claim to be carbon free when really they're not. Their ratepayers aren't paying for it. We're paying for it, and they get the benefits of large hydro and to some extent nuclear, and not showing up on their power content label as carbon free. And so I agree that it's not nuclear allocation is not something that may be consistent with our community's desires if you put it out to them. But I think that as a committee and me as a member of this committee, it is my obligation to also put these opportunities forward to the board for consideration, because not doing so means that we are basically making decisions about how or when we should save money or give up money that is due to our ratepayers. And so for that reason, I think it is a board decision that they should consider both options, taking only large hydro and or taking large hydro and the nuclear. And I just want to say this because it's disheartening in some ways to accuse staff of being in any way drug dealers or anything else. That is not what they are. They are simply doing this because it is their obligation as staff to bring proposals, whether we like them or not, forward to the community and to the board. And so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Monica. Anne Olivia? Although if, I mean, I do have something to say as well, Anna Olivia, if you want to go
Okay,
last.
go, go for it. That's fine.
All right.
I'm always happy to wait.
I actually want to reiterate what I heard from Monica, and also I can't remember where else we heard it, but it is the obligation of EBCE staff to bring opportunities like this to the board. It is up to the board to decide. So in my opinion, I support the hydro for the reasons that Cynthia indicated. I also support staff's opportunity to present to the board for their decision. And so I will say that when we had nuclear on our agenda, I don't know, last month, the month before, and I asked everybody to go talk to their constituents, I talked to mine via email. I asked everybody, do you care if nuclear is part of this? Now, my group is small. It's not like it's SEIOU 1021, but 75% of my people didn't care. You know, so there are people out there who are not as worried about nuclear. I have no idea whether or not, you know, my small group is at all representative of the larger population. But I will say that these are the people that I'm supposed to be representing. And so I'm putting forward that as a CAC member, I would support hydro because we've had it before. And I would support that the CAC not take a position necessarily on rejecting or keeping nuclear, but that it's a board decision. So the last thing I would say is I do think, and Anna Olivia, you may be asking some of this, is I would only want them to move forward knowing that there is some ironclad contracts in place such that nothing can come back you know, to the EBCE in terms of this. That transaction that Alita Dupree talked about is solid and in place prior to any choice made by EBCE to take nuclear. So with that, Anna Olivia, I'll put it to you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to attempt to use my camera just because I'm actually speaking, and we'll see if it stays strong enough. So if it goes bad, just let me know, and I will turn my video back off. So thank you for bringing this forward. I do want to provide a little bit of clarification on something that I heard. I didn't hear Barbara accusing staff of being drug dealers. What I heard her say was that this could put EBCE in the position of acting as in a similar fashion like drug dealers, where you take something but don't keep it and just get rid of it. So just to clarify, I didn't hear an accusation of staff in that. I realized that it could be taken differently, but what I heard from our community member was concern for the integrity of the agency, not an accusation towards staff, who I do appreciate having brought this forward. I have some kind of technical questions. I'll try not to get too far in the weeds here. But this here said that it was purchased or will be purchased for a cost of $0, and that the last one was purchased for a cost of $0. But in seeking clarification last time, it was not purchased for $0. It was purchased for an incremental cost of $0. And so I just want to clarify that this would also be purchased for an incremental cost of $0. Is that accurate?
I think that the nuance there, incremental cost versus total cost. The total cost is $0, and the incremental cost is $0. I don't think there's really much of a difference. I
mean, the costs for this are through the PCIA, so the customers are paying for it, and the incremental cost on top of that is $0.
Correct. So but the total cost to the agency is $0 because we're paying the PCIA irrespective of whether or not we take action here.
Okay, just clarifying, because they're different numbers. And so I also have spoken with my constituents, and many of them are quite technical. So I'm just making sure that I bring them back good information. On slide 4, there was, let me actually get back to slide 4 here. There was mention here of
Stephanie, you're showing your Snapchat, and there you go. Thank you.
Oh, was it slide 5?
Snapchat, whatever it was Slack.
Let me see if it's actually 4, if I was wrong. It was, yeah, it says number 4, so, but I think that the one that says number 4 in the bottom of the thingy, nuclear energy sale. The marketer would then resell the energy to a third party, and EBC would receive half the net revenue. If the energy supplier is not able to resell the product, they would retain the energy. So in this scenario, is EBCE the energy supplier?
No.
Who
So
is
the
the
energy
energy?
supplier is the third party we would sell it to.
Okay, so so then there are several questions embedded in this, and so I'm trying to put them in a logical order. EBCE gets the energy. We work with a marketer to sell it. If it can't be sold, what happens to the energy?
We wouldn't work with a marketer to sell it. We would sell it to the marketer, and then they would share the revenue from their resale of it.
Got it. So in that sale, is that contract an as available contract or a scheduled delivery contract?
It would be a flexible volume contract, so all volumes that are delivered would be transferred to them.
Okay, so so for other folks, the reason that I'm asking this is, like, we just spent a huge amount of money to buy energy during the heat wave, right? We had a huge amount of money. It was brutal. Sometimes, and I guess I just have a couple more things in here. If Diablo Canyon doesn't produce the energy, I'm trying to figure out liability here. So if their unit is down, right, like it was, or the fear of their unit is down, so they're doing blackouts instead of the potential of Diablo Canyon going back out, then who is responsible for replacing that energy if Diablo Canyon doesn't deliver it?
Jim, jump in anytime, but there is no replacement requirement here, because in that scenario where you say Diablo is down and there's an overall market shortage, or you have very high prices, this transaction would be structured in a way to eliminate that price volatility risk, in the same way that if we were to accept an allocation of, say, large hydro, let's use that example.
Mm-hmm.
If PG&E does not deliver large hydro, less or more large hydro, it does not have a price effect, because really what we're talking about is an indexed deal. So the market price is the index. The index may fluctuate up, it may fluctuate down. It has no bearing on this particular transaction. It's because it's really a transaction for the environmental commodity. Jim, but I'm sure you can provide even further depth on this one.
No, I think you got it for the most part. And so I think what Nick is saying, I think he said it very well, is that this is an actual physical energy transaction. So regardless of what the plant does, whether it puts energy on the grid or not, it is a right to the attribute. The revenues greater or less than the operating costs of the facility are absorbed by PG&E. And it's entitled to the attribute when that energy is delivered that we receive through the allocation. And that same title would be transferred to the entity. So we're not buying a fixed amount we are not receiving a fixed amount from the facility, we're receiving a percent share. So we get 1% of 100, but if it delivers 80, we still get 1% of 80. And so there's no mechanism where we wouldn't have to compensate the person that we would be selling it to if we were short, because it's all based on the unit contingent nature of the resource.
And the
If
transaction is
delivers, it's fine. If
100%
over
volume.
delivers, it's fine. We're
The
just a
deal-
percent allocation.
The deal has 100% volume tolerance, so up or down.
Great. Okay, that is really helpful and alleviates a pretty heavy chunk of concern, but it doesn't alleviate a different one. If we can't sell it and there is an issue associated with Diablo Canyon's output that it falls into the cost causation category, right? Are we responsible for this portion of it? If there is a disaster, cost causation would say, because we benefit from this nuclear power, there is, once we benefit from it, there is a direct tie to cost associated with it. So if there is an issue that happens and Diablo Canyon is liable for that issue, does the third party then also assume liability for our proportionate share? Because you can't, like, the attribute is not separable from the energy in the state of California. I have spoken extensively now with every human possible on this issue. We do not have ZECs in California. The attribute is not separable from carbon-free energy in the state of California. So we aren't and you can't sell an attribute more than once anyway, so we would just be selling the energy. So there is energy here. But where is this liability landing? And because you can't just sell an attribute, right? That it doesn't, you can't do that with carbon-free energy. We don't have an accounting mechanism for it yet in place. So,
you know, Jim or Howard, feel free to jump in here too, but just so I understand the question, the concern is if there is liability, if that somehow our accepting this allocation transfers liability, operational liability from Diablo Canyon onto EVC because we've accepted the allocation.
Oh, because we would be benefiting from the energy produced from Diablo Canyon, we are then liable for a portion of the costs that Diablo Canyon. So if there is a cost-causing event that happens, because we benefit from this energy, cost causation then puts it on us. So this is not the first time this has happened in California. It's happened with San Onofre. It's happened in other places where an issue, the cost of that issue gets transferred then to the customers, right? And so, or any party that benefits from the energy being generated. So as an entity that would then be profiting from it, we then fall into the realm of cost causation. So is our third party then taking that benefit? Is there a way to structure that in? Because I don't see a legal out.
I'm not familiar with this principle of cost causation that you're referring to. So I'm not aware of it.
Note, Nick, that so if I could just jump in, I think technically any liabilities from Diablo could be passed on irrespective of whether we accept the nuclear or not, because it's technically paid through the PCIA. So the decision to accept nuclear or not is sort of not really relevant for general costs.
I think the point there though, Howard, is in that scenario, our customers have liability because they are PG&E customers and they are subject to the PCIA. That's not, I think, what Anna Olivia is saying. Is that I think Anna Olivia is saying that because EVC as an enterprise is benefiting, the enterprise has liability, and I'm not familiar with that.
So it's what happened with San Onofre. So I would be happy to write up and send y'all the information, but it is what has happened. Feedback loop. It is what has happened in California. It is what happened to San Onofre. So I have
I think
concern about
PG&E
us accepting this.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say in any scenario of liability, the liability, my understanding of the principle of liability here would be the liability would be on PG&E, and our customers, as PG&E customers, our customers would retain that liability. I'm not aware of a third party. Let's not use San Onofre or Diablo as an example. Let's take a solar or a wind farm. If a wind farm, if there's liability associated with a wind farm and you're buying from that wind farm, the liability is on the owner of the wind farm, not necessarily the buyer of the energy of the wind farm.
That's not how the cases go. If you benefit from the sale of something, then you are the cause of that cost happening. So the distribution of that cost is distributed based on the proportional benefits to an action happening. And those items are still on people's bills. I guess that I would move that we reject this this offer. There's I will write up the issues around cost causation. It's a super complicated, but the real simple thing is, if you are the cause of a cost occurring, if you are a beneficiary of something, then you are liable for a proportion of the cost. And so if an issue happens,
for the hydro allocation, as an example, we do not retain liability for PG&E's oversight of the hydro, as an example. It would be the same cost causation principle. PG&E customers retain that liability, and our customers are PG&E customers. So I think that's perhaps, and so in San Onofre's case, you know, San Diego and Southern California Edison customers still have a charge on their bill because they were the bundled customers of those entities. But you know,
they also ran into the replacement power. So if anybody is counting on something for power, then the one providing it is the one that I guess I would like some more details on this. But in the respective time, it's now 8:30. I would say that I have some real concerns about the impact this could have on our agency, and that I would move that we once again accept the large hydro and reject the nuclear portion of this allocation.
Second, Cynthia Landry.
All right, I was just going to say, is that an official, so the official motion is to accept the large hydro and reject PG&E. We have that in a second. I see Monica's hand is up, so there'll be more discussion. Monica?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel compelled to chime in here. I've been in this business for 31 years, and for the most part, I rely on our attorneys for this type of advice. And I've been in contract negotiations probably for 20 years out of those 30 years. And I have yet to ever see a contract that transfers that kind of liability to us, or even a situation where that's the case. And if that's the real concern, then quite honestly, we shouldn't be signing any contracts, because EBCE is liable for everything, whether it's a solar facility or installing a battery at somebody's home. So, I mean, it seems, and no disrespect, Olivia, but you're not an attorney and you haven't reviewed these contracts. And so I have a hard time taking advice from someone who's not an attorney on this. And so I will not support the motion. Not for that reason, but for other reasons.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, so we have a motion and a second. Stephanie, can you call roll, please?
Sure. Eldred?
And Olivia, you're on mute.
And Olivia?
Yes.
Pacheco?
Aye.
Padilla?
No.
Landry?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Sutter?
No.
Thank you. Motion passes. 4 ayes, 2 noes.
Thank you all. So our next item then is the CAC member and staff announcements, including any requests to place items on a future CAC agenda. And I will bring up for the group that Cynthia has been in contact with me about potentially bringing up the Alliance, what's the one out in Livermore?
It's the Aramis project.
Aramis project back to the CAC in January, especially and assuming that the board, Alameda County Board of Supervisors passes it. It's passed through zoning. So Cynthia, I do have that as a potential item already for January. So
thank you.
I do have an announcement, but I can go after all the CAC members. Go ahead.
Okay. I think Monica, your hand was up, and then Anna Olivia.
That was a mistake. It was a mistake. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I put mine back up. So some of you might know that I am nearing completion of my environmental and energy law degree. As my final project at Vermont Law, I just got an award actually from the school. I'm really excited for academic excellence. I'm really excited. And they have asked me to work on a publication. It will actually be something that we are going to be working on publishing, creating a set of educational materials for non-energy experts who are serving on both boards and advisory committees for CACs and municipal utilities. There will be a whole series of like 15-minute explainers looking at the really complicated topics involved in this. I am reaching out to members of the CAC and our board, asking for input on topics that would have been helpful or continue to be helpful as we move forward. We'll be reaching out to some of the other CACs and municipal utilities as well, as the model that we are using right now with support from our incredible and dedicated staff is one that is proving to work really well, and we expect to expand in the future. So I'll be working on that project over the next 6 months and hope to get impact from you all on it.
Great, congratulations on that.
Congratulations, Anna Olivia.
Yeah.
Also.
Stephanie?
I'll second and third that. Congratulations. I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to the January and February meetings. They will be held on Tuesdays because the third Monday is a holiday in each month. So our next meeting will be January 19th. It is incorrectly noticed as January 11th. It is January 19th at 6 p.m. And the February meeting will also be on the Tuesday. So I'll give that date at the end of January's meeting.
Thank you. And what is the February timeline? It's February what?
It is also for February, let's see.
The date.
Get everything to open. I'm running low on resources on my system right now. Let me find another calendar.
Is it just the Tuesday after when the Monday was going to be?
Yes, it's just the Tuesday exactly after President's Day. So it will be on February
16th.
It'll be 16th and 17th for the board meetings, yes.
Okay, and then January, it's 19th, the Tuesday.
It'll be the 19th.
And February, the 16th. Okay, great. Thank you.
And what time is the meeting going to be?
6 p.m.
They're still scheduled for 6 p.m.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing none, I adjourn to Tuesday, January 19th, which is not the date.
Happy holidays.
In the unless you changed it.
No, I changed it. I caught that after. Yes, I was like, those are two very important birthdays. So.
Okay, great. Thank you all.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye. Good night.
Bye.
Happy holidays. Bye.